Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. It is Wednesday, March 27th. I am your host, Tommy Brzee, and we have a great show for you today. We are going to start with some new rules at the NFL level and talk about how it's very possible they might find their way down to the college football level. Then we're going to jump into RG3. He had some comments last week talking about Caleb Williams and possibly denying the Bears drafting him, essentially. And then he had some additional comments against Shedeur Sanders, and Ryan Poles responded to RG3, so wanted to break down all of that for you guys. Then we're going to jump into breakout players for 2024. This has become a very, very common segment on this show. I'm starting to reach my wit's end with it, but at the end of the day, we have a good part 4 for you today, a SEC-themed part 4 for you today, and then we're going to finish it off with a Spotlight Wednesday. And today we're going to talk about the Clemson Tigers. Obviously, a lot going on around that program. The national perception of Clemson is changing day by day, so a huge year ahead of them for Dabo Swinney and company. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all that we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to see your questions on the screen, you can see your name, your question, and I can respond to it, is to use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all, because you get to see your questions on the screen, get to see your name on the screen, and maybe bring up something that I either hadn't brought up or just a question you had about the topic I was talking about. So, but let's jump right in. The NFL just adopted a couple of new rule changes that are kind of taking the world by storm right now. There is one that I think most people are for, and I think there's one that most people are against. And why don't we start with the one that most people are against? They have officially banned the hip drop tackle in the NFL football, and I do think that a lot of these rules have the chance to roll down to college football. That's why we're talking about them on the college football show. We've seen, helmet communication and the 2-minute warning already this year is being introduced, and it's very possible that more are going to come after it. And the kickoff rule in particular, I know, is one that the College Football Rules Committee is looking at very closely, but the hip drop is a little bit grayer. I haven't necessarily heard any concrete news on that, so why don't we start there, and then we'll jump into what's going on with the kickoff, because that one's a little bit more convoluted. But the hip drop tackle, if anyone is unaware, if you were watching the Ravens games throughout the year, you knew that Mark Andrews, their star tight end, had been injured for a long time. That happened on what they were calling a hip drop tackle. I'm not exactly sure what the injury was. I believe it was something with his knee, but basically Logan Thomas of the Bengals was tackling him from behind, basically dropped his hips, as they say, and landed on his back legs, and he got twisted up and hurt something in his lower leg. I can't remember if it was ankle or knee, but first of all, I have no issue with the NFL or any football league trying to protect the athletes. Obviously, this is a very dangerous game we play, and it's super important for everyone to be able to go out there and be as safe as possible. Obviously, there's certain things that are out of their control, but as safe as they can possibly be is the most important thing, and I fully understand where they're coming from with making this rule in regards to that. However, there are a couple of problems with this rule, and it's the problems that everyone else has. First of all, hip drop is not necessarily a term that players even knew before last year. I don't think this is a term that was invented by players. I don't think this is a term that was invented by coaches. I think it is something that makes it easier for, whether that is rules committee members or owners or fans, to understand what's going on a certain play. So I don't think this is something that players necessarily do with any... I don't think they're necessarily aware that they're doing it. They're just trying to tackle someone, and in tackling a 280-pound tight end, sometimes you got to use your weight, and that's just kind of the way things go. So hip drop tackles aren't really a thing. Obviously, there are some that, show, the linebacker or the DB using all of their weight to bring the guy down. but that's not necessarily what I would dub a hip drop tackle, because I don't think there's really such thing. I think there's just such thing as tackling someone from behind. So the reality of all of this is football is a very dangerous sport, and slowly we've been trying to make it a little bit less dangerous and make sure that there's not these catastrophic injuries. And it's a huge deal for the future of football, because the more these catastrophic injuries pop up, the more the people on the other side of the fence that say there should be no such thing as football or should be entirely flag football are going to slowly start to win. And that's just kind of the way things are. The more aggressive injuries you have, the more you have to pay attention to those type of things. So obviously this is something that you have to pay attention to, and you have to try your darndest to make sure that it doesn't get in the way or hurt any excess amount of players. But at the end of the day, this is football. This is a game where it's going to be violent. It's going to be dangerous. Kids are going to get hurt. And that's just kind of something that you can't avoid no matter how many rules are put into place. We've seen targeting be put into place, and although I'm sure the numbers overall of concussions and that type of thing are down, I'm part of the group that tends to believe it might not be down for the reason that everyone thinks it is, that, they're actually not concussed. I think certain players just try to shake it off and keep it moving. And so there's a double-edged sword to every one of these rules, and I think this one's no different. I think mainly my biggest worry with this rule is targeting. The big problem is there is a lot of nuance within that rule, and they've started to kind of take the nuance out of it and it become a little bit more clear-cut, but that's been tough to do. Now, this one has infinite amount of nuance because no one really knows what they're looking for. I'll be totally honest with you, because this is not a thing that most players know what they're doing, most coaches coach. So it's one of those things where defenders in NFL and in college football to a certain extent are essentially being told you can't do a lot. You can't hit them high, don't hit them low. You can't hit them from behind, so if you're beat, just kind of let them go. Also, don't land on them if you're tackling them. There's so many different things that they have to think about while also trying to play the best defense they can. And it's taking a certain amount of the competitive advantage, or not competitive advantage, but it's putting competitive advantage towards the offense more and more. And it's something that obviously more points are really fun. Obviously, we love to see a ton of points on the scoreboard, but it's not football. Football is meant to be, a battle between two sides of the ball that are giving everything they have and are on steady footing with each other. It's not, the offense having the ability to essentially do what they want, and then when the defense makes a play, a flag being thrown and them getting 15 more yards. So obviously this hip drop tackle is very controversial. I think in my eyes it's a little ridiculous. I think there will be a number of games throughout the season that are being defined by these calls, and they'll be wrong, or at least they'll be confusing because no one really knows what they're looking for. So I tend to think this one will probably not find its way down to college football, but who knows? Because at the end of the day, the NFL has implemented a lot of these rules that I thought were a little ridiculous, and they're still here today. So who am I to say what they're going to do and how it will trickle down to college football? But let's get to the kickoff rule, because I know that college football is looking into this. Seth Emerson over at The Athletic did a great piece about the kickoff rule and how the college football powers that be are kind of looking at it. Kirby Smart was a big topic, was a big source in this article talking about the merits of it and how they're looking at the NFL for this and kind of tinkering with it as they go. He is a part of the rules committee for the NCAA, so that is obviously a huge piece of this. Those are the group of people that would implement this rule and get it in front of college football faces. So to break down the rule, before we get into the weeds of what it means for college football, the rule is kickoffs are still at the 35. So the kicker will still be kicking the ball from the 35-yard from their own 35-yard line, but 10 players on the kicking team will now line up at the opposing team's 40-yard line. So they will be separated by 25 yards, the kicker and the rest of the kick team, so 10 players. And then the returning team will be on their own 35. So that means there will only be 5 yards separating these two groups. So 10 players on the 40 and then 9 players on the 35, as there's usually 2 returners on a kickoff return in college football. So, or in college football and in the NFL, really. But so then you'll have 2 players deep. So it's obviously a very different formation. It will limit the amount of time that these guys have to pick up speed and have these big time collisions. And also, it'll add some very interesting strategy to the game that was not there before, that I'll get into here in a minute. But the kickoff team cannot move until the ball is inside the 20-yard line. So that is a huge rule. Obviously, they will be giving a head start to the returner on a lot of these cases. And touchbacks are now moved to the receiving team's 30. So no longer can you kick it out of the back of the end zone and still be put at the 20. Now you're at the 30, and the team has a little bit more momentum going in their direction. So this will obviously lead to many more returns. I think that's very clear. You're going to want to return the ball. You're going to want to be able to get as far upfield as possible. Obviously, you have essentially they'll be catching the ball usually inside the 10 or the 5, so about 20-25 yards will separate you and the rest of the group, and that gives you a lot of space to work with different trick plays, with a lot of speed on the field for some of these teams, and it'll be really interesting to see how all of this develops. I mean, in the NFL, someone like Tyreek Hill running this is almost unfair because you almost get the ball at the 30 every single time, because the second he catches the ball, he's pretty much 20 yards downfield. So he's someone that I would not be surprised if they placed him back there on kickoffs for the Miami Dolphins this year. But talking more back to the college football world, this is something that has been kicked around for a while. They've met with NFL people as this has gone through. And Kirby said he is in favor of the rule, but he didn't necessarily say because of the, safety implications. Obviously, I'm sure he's not necessarily opposed to that by any means. I think he is a fan of the safety implications that this does have. But Kirby really was a big favor of this because it used to be, for a long time in his head coaching career especially, you would get guys out on special teams, and early on in his career when he was a coordinator or a position coach, those would be valuable reps because guys were returning kicks and you'd have to set up different angles and different packages for the way you wanted to run down the field and attack and all of these different things. So those were very valuable reps before they could get reps at their own position. Slowly, that's kind of changed, and I'll take you through kind of the touchback numbers throughout college football because it would make a lot of sense for them to adopt this. In 2023, it was up to 49.6%. In 2020, it was at 41.2%. 2019 was 43.6%, so I don't really know what happened in 2020, but a massive increase has been happening over the last couple of years in touchbacks, and it's made these reps for the third string linebacker or the third string running back or the safety or whatever it is, have made those way less important and way less valuable because you're essentially just sprinting down the field and coming on back. So I think now you have the ability to take on a block pretty much every single time. You will work on shedding that block. You'll work on open field tackling. You'll work on angles of, how to attack someone coming off an angle. All of these great things that are super important to especially someone like a linebacker or a safety. Those are super important traits to have. And being able to work those out in special teams is going to be a huge benefit to these young players to, once they get on the field, be able to jump in and be ready to go. And also, just finally, one last thing about this, special teams coordinators for a long time have been kind of the unsung heroes of a lot of these teams. Obviously, they do incredible work, but when you talk about a team, you talk about offensive and defensive coordinators. special teams coordinators are about to become way more important at the NFL level, and then if it's adopted into college football, at the college football level. And there are a ton of really incredible ones out there that are already doing incredible work, but at the end of the day, their hands are kind of tied for how much they can do on a kickoff return. Now they're no longer really tied. They can kind of play around with things, do different things, and especially early on, if this rule was to be adopted, it changes the entire way that teams have to prepare. So those first couple of weeks could be a ton of trick plays, a ton of weird plays, and maybe some touchdowns off kickoff. So I'm very excited for this rule. The hip drop tackle, I really hope that college football is able to avoid, because I think it's going to be honestly a disaster at the NFL level, but we'll see what happens there. I've thought a couple of different rule changes that the NFL has made would not be gone over well, and they've been there ever since. So it'll be interesting to watch. The kickoff, I'm all for. I think that's really exciting. I think it'll be a fun way to keep a team at least involved until the very last play. So I'm very excited for that. Obviously, right now, there's no concrete evidence that they are making super big strides towards making these a reality in college football. But the kickoff rule they are looking at, the hip drop tackle, I think they'll wait on for at least a year or two. But I would not be surprised if they made their way down to college football, and I will obviously keep you updated if any of these start to gain some traction, and we might see them in 2024 or 2025, probably more likely for any of these rule changes. But obviously some interesting things happening in the NFL, and when it happens in the NFL, we know college football might not be too far behind. But that'll do it for this opening segment, and we're going to go to a break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about RG3. He had some comments last week talking about Caleb Williams and the Bears. He had some comments this week talking about Shedeur Sanders and the possible opportunity for him to, quote-unquote, pull an Eli, as Dion put it. So I will talk about all of that right after this.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the stuff going on in the NFL, some rule changes that have happened up there and possibly could trickle down to college football, so broke down those rules for you and what they would look like at the college football level, some implications of them. But let's jump into RG3. He has been in the news quite a bit lately, I won't lie. Last week he had some comments about Caleb Williams and the Bears that I'll get to here in just a second, and he had some comments about Shedeur Sanders and possibly his draft process going into the 2025 draft, and I'll break that down towards the end of this segment. But let's start with Caleb Williams. I thought about doing this segment last week. I kicked around the idea, but some stuff came up. Obviously, it was a huge week for the Pac-12 and for the ACC, so tons of stuff to cover, but finally got my way around to it, and Ryan Poles gave me a good reason to come right back around to it, because he was on the Pat McAfee show and was asked about these comments and was none too happy. Let's put it that way. He said, I think the exact quote was, "It pisses me right off." So understand. I think that's something that a lot of people felt around the Chicago area, because Ryan Poles and the new regime of the Chicago Bears have done a fairly good job since they've gotten there. Obviously, there's been some missteps, and there's definitely been not necessarily the greatest setup in the past for sure, but Ryan Poles was brought in, and Matt Eberflus as well was brought in to change that path, right? To change the narrative around Chicago, the narrative around the Bears, that it is a place, it is a place where quarterbacks go to die. That's something that they came in to change. They came in to fix, and I think they're doing an incredible job at fixing it. And I think I think Robert Griffin III's comments were a little ridiculous, and let's break down exactly what those comments were. He essentially said that if Caleb Williams was drafted to Chicago, he should refuse to go there. He cited a number of former quarterbacks that have struggled there. He cited that Matt Eberflus is technically going into this season kind of on the hot seat, so you could be going into your second season with a second coach. And some of that is totally valid. Some of that I totally get, and I understand kind of where he's coming from. But there's a number of reasons that I really disagree with this take overall. I think, number one, the Bears, I talked about it a little bit earlier, but the Bears have been doing a lot of really incredible things since Ryan Poles showed up. They've been making a lot of roster moves that are very important. There are real worries around Matt Eberflus. I don't argue with that, but he did a huge thing in hiring Shane Waldron as their new OC. With all the shakeup that happened over Seattle, they were able to pick him up, and he is a great offensive coordinator, brought the best out in Geno Smith the last couple of years, and I think he's a great addition to this staff. I think Waldron is someone that can do incredible amounts of things if you give him a quarterback like Caleb Williams. And also, Matt Eberflus, as we know, might not be the greatest overall head coach. I think there are some worries about some of the nuances of being a head coach, but at the end of the day, you saw towards the end of last season, the dude can coach defense. I don't think there's any question about that. So if he is in a position where he can handle defense and Shane Waldron can handle the offense, I think that is something that could absolutely work for the future of the Bears. Obviously, Eberflus will have more on him being the head coach, but at the end of the day, if you have those two guys and they know exactly what they're doing at those sides of the ball, you're going to be very successful 9 times out of 10. So as long as Matt Eberflus doesn't make any crazy like time management mistakes or things like that, you could have a very sustainable model where maybe your coach is in a little bit of hot water going into the season, but coming out of it, he definitely could be totally out of that. So, but then a couple of the roster moves that they made, obviously DJ Moore, adding him last year was a huge deal. That trade has become better and better by the day if you're a Bears fan. And then they added Keenan Allen recently, and that is a huge piece for a young quarterback because Keenan Allen has as good of hands as there is in the entire NFL. He's someone that is super reliable. And then you have Cole Kmet, who I think honestly might be the biggest piece for Caleb Williams going into this first year. Obviously, nothing is set in stone, but I'm working under the assumption that Caleb Williams will be the number one pick and will be the player for the Bears going forward. And I think Cole Kmet is huge for him. Young quarterbacks need as many fail-safes as possible. They need as many guys to go to on a 3rd and 8, and they know that that guy is going to catch the ball as long as you put it on target, and Cole Kmet is that guy. I think he's continuing to develop and will be so much better this upcoming year. Will be honestly one of the top 10 to 5 tight ends in the entire league this upcoming year, and I think he'll be a huge help to a young quarterback, in this case, Caleb Williams. And then the offensive line, I think, is a fair place to criticize the Bears. There has been a lot of worry about that. Justin Fields was running for his life a little bit last year at times. But Darnell Wright is someone that is developing at left tackle. They will continue need to build it out and add more players, possibly some veterans coming in. But at the end of the day, this is a group that will slowly get better. They are still young at a number of the line positions, and as long as they can slowly get better and give Caleb Williams, 10% or 15% better coverage than they gave Justin Fields, I think they'll be in good shape. And then finally, the defense. I think this is probably the biggest flip that has happened under Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus while they've been at the Bears. This defense is for real, and I think it's something that is only going to get better with time. I think it's very possible they add someone at the 9 spot at defensive tackle or possibly an edge rusher. It seems like wide receiver is the going theory right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went for interior defensive guy, maybe like Byron Murphy out of Texas, at that 9 position, or maybe trade down and get more picks and then pick up some defensive guys later in the first round. But at the end of the day, they are in a very good shape for this defense going forward. Montez Sweat was a huge addition last year. The back end of that defense is absolutely for real. They have guys like Kyler Gordon, but also Jalen Johnson is the linchpin of that defense. He's the guy that really makes everything work because you need that number 1 corner. I think we've talked about it a number of times at the college football level. It's no different at the NFL level. You need a guy on the outside that you can either travel with the number 1 receiver because there are so many good ones across the league, or just have him in a side of the field where no one's throwing there, and it makes your job so much easier. So having someone like Jalen Johnson on that team is huge for this Bears defense. But let's get into kind of the real reason that RG3 was going after the Bears and was the reason that all of this has become a big thing. And the idea of him not going to the Bears is even a conversation. And it's the Justin Fields time in Chicago, because it was a very complicated time. There were a lot of things that the Bears did not do very well to put him in positions to win. I think Luke Getsy was not a good fit for him at offensive coordinator. I think they did not have a lot of weapons before DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, and Cole Kmet, as we talked about a second ago, is still kind of hitting his stride in this league. So there was not a lot going in Justin Fields' direction, to be totally honest. He made a lot of remarkable plays. He did a lot of really, really incredible things. And there were definitely some ways that the Bears could have helped him to be a better player in the time that he was there. All that being said, there were opportunities by Justin Fields in big-time games, or in just every game pretty much, that just can't be missed. At the NFL level, there are certain throws, there are certain plays that just you can't miss and expect to be a long-term starting quarterback in the NFL. It's not something that really happens very often, and he would miss guys over the middle on crossers almost routinely. There were a lot of times where he would underthrow a deep throw, or overthrow it was actually more likely. He had a lot of problems throwing the ball, and it's something that you can blame all the stuff around him as much as you want, and the stuff around him was not great. I won't necessarily fault you there, but at a certain point, Justin Fields holds a certain amount of responsibility for what went down in Chicago, and he could have played better football. I don't think there's any argument about that. So as we go through all of this and we talk about, how Justin Fields was handled and how the Bears have kind of slowly started to change, I think that's the biggest thing. Is Justin Fields came into a Bears organization that was in a really bad place. The roster was not nearly as good as it needed to be. The defense was questionable at best. And throughout his time, all of those things have slowly gotten better. They just didn't get better at the speed that he needed it to get better. So it took time for them to build out the process that they wanted to. Matt Eberflus came in, Ryan Poles came in, and it's taking time for them to get to the place that they want to. And unfortunately, it came at the expense of Justin Fields losing his position in Chicago. But at the end of the day, you have a kid sitting here in Caleb Williams that can change your entire franchise if you use him the right way. And he's walking into a situation where I would be hard-pressed to make an argument for the Commanders being a better situation or the Patriots being a better situation right this second than the Bears. So I think this is as good of a situation as he is going to fall into, because if the Bears don't take him, the Commanders are taking him. If the Commanders and the Bears don't take him for some crazy reason, the Patriots are taking him. So those are the three options, and out of the three options, Chicago comfortably wins that battle in my eyes. And maybe some people have some other ideas about that, but at the end of the day, I think the Bears are set up pretty much as good as they have been in a decade. It's hard to conceptualize just how long it's been since the Bears have been a big time player, but at the end of the day, this is a really good situation for a quarterback to walk into. And with all that being said, a top quarterback is always a gamble. There's no roadmap that shows you the exact person that you need to draft number one overall to make everything work. There's no way to really know what a kid is until you see him on the practice field, until you see him in live battle. All of these things are hard to figure out. Sometimes the in between the ear stuff is hard to figure out, even at the college level and watching all that tape. So it's always going to be a question mark. But you have a kid sitting in front of you that is one of the more remarkable prospects we've seen in quite some time. I wouldn't put him on the level of the Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Lucks, but he's right below that. He is absolutely remarkable. And you have a situation that is continuously getting better. Every single year they have made marketable strides where you're watching the team and you're saying, okay, they are better here, here, and here than they were a year ago. And it's marketable difference. So I don't necessarily buy into this idea that kids need to, hold out for a certain franchise because from the outside it looks not great, or from their past it hasn't looked that great, because everything is changing in the NFL every single day, and great fits you don't really know until you get on the field, until you get around those teammates. Maybe it's the perfect place for him to be, and maybe they're making improvements to the culture that haven't quite made their way out to the public, haven't quite shown themselves on Sundays, but they are going to start. So there's a lot of stuff at play here. I think RG3's comments I don't agree with by any means, even if you're just talking about the Bears. But overarching, I don't love the idea of kids, pulling an Eli and being able to decide essentially which team they want to play for at the next level, because that's not something that every player can do. I was watching the Cover 3 pod, and Tom Fornelli kind of put it as well as anyone can when talking about the Shedeur Sanders situation, where this isn't player power, it's player privilege. It's the reality where some players can do this because they are either incredibly talented, so teams are still going to take them even if they deny from one team, or they have, they're not hurting financially and they have the ability to hold out for whatever deal or whatever team they want to. Not everyone can do that. So the idea that this is going to be like a new trend around college football, and RG3 saying, this is the age of player empowerment, you better get ready for it, it's not really something that you should, bank on seeing from a lot of guys. I think there are certain guys that have the ability to do it. Shedeur Sanders and Caleb Williams are two of those guys. Caleb Williams has pretty much put away these rumors and said that's not the case. But at the end of the day, there are only certain players that can do this, and the idea that multiple players or players in general should do this is just crazy. So I love RG3. He is one of, honestly, my favorite college football quarterbacks of all time, but don't love the take. I think he definitely missed the mark with this one. But at the end of the day, I understand where he was coming from. I understand some of the arguments that he was making. But at the end of the day, when you look at the Bears roster today, then you look back at what it was 2 years ago, the amount of progress they have made is just remarkable. So if you're Caleb Williams and you're looking around at the different options for where you could go, the Bears is about as good as you're going to get. So I think he will be the Bears pick. I think he'll go number one overall, and none of this will really matter. But we're going to take a short break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about breakout players in 2024 on the offensive side of the ball. We have done now 3 of these in the past. We're going to get part 4 for you. I think we might have to tap out at around part 5, but we'll deal with that. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, is what I was trying to say. But we'll take our second break, and we will be right back with that.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about RG3's comments about Caleb Williams and Shedeur Sanders and their possible holding out for the right team in their draft processes. I don't necessarily agree with the take, but you can look back at that segment if you want to know exactly why. But let's get back to one of our classics, breakout players for 2024 on the offensive side of the ball. This is now part 4 of this series, and I got to be honest with you guys, I'm running out of steam a little bit. So I think part 5 might be the end of the offense and defensive portions of this, but for right now, let's get it rolling. And let's start with Brock Vandagriff. This is going to be an SEC entirely an SEC segment now that I look at it, but we got some incredible guys in the SEC that are ready to fully step into the spotlight, and Brock Vandagriff is at the very top of the list. I've talked about Vandagriff quite a bit on here, and it's really because he's someone that I love. I think his ability is absolutely off the charts. The arm talent is incredible. He just so happened to be behind 2 guys that are really hard to beat out. Stetson Bennett was the most successful quarterback in UGA history when he got there, and Carson Beck is likely, in my book at least right now, the number 1 overall pick for 2025. So not necessarily a situation that he was going to succeed in or he was probably going to start in. So he has found his way over to Lexington, Kentucky, and he will be leading the Wildcats in 2024. And I think he's going to be ready. I think he's been waiting for this moment. I think he is sat for a very long time, and he is a little bit sick of sitting. I got to be totally honest. I think he's ready to get to live football, be the guy under center, be the guy calling the shots, and he has plenty to work with. Barry Brown, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated receivers in the entire country. His speed is just off the charts. Dane Key is someone that I really, really like. He's very, very smart, technical receiver. And then Jamori Macklin is a elite slot receiver, and it's something that they absolutely need at Kentucky right now. So a lot to work with that receiving core. He has Chip Trainum right next to him in the backfield that I think is going to be a very formidable back. They had Ray Davis a year ago, and he had quite the year. So I think Chip Trainum will be no different. I think, honestly, the best way for Kentucky to get the most out of Brock Vandagriff is just go out there and let him rip. I think the best way for him to maybe get to, his highest, reach his highest potential. I totally lost it there. Reach his highest potential. I think the most important thing for him is just let him go out there and make mistakes. Do it trial by fire, where he is slinging the ball downfield to Barry Brown, or is out of the pocket slinging the ball downfield. Allow him to do what he does best, which is throw the football, do these incredible numbers, and let him get comfortable, because the more he gets comfortable, the more the numbers get better and better. And although 2024 might not necessarily be the year that he entirely blows up, it'll be a year that he absolutely could blow up if he can get comfortable as quickly as possible. So I'm very excited for Brock Vandagriff. I think he's someone that, as of right now, people are excited about, but cautiously optimistic. I think that will change very quickly when 2024 starts. Another guy that is a huge deal out in College Station is Ruben Owens. He is someone that is going to be a huge running back for them in 2024. Was the top running back in the 2023 class and flashed at moments last year. Had a little under 400 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. He does have Le'Veon Moss next to him, who is a really, really solid running back in that room. But I think Owens is just a little bit different. I think he's someone that will end up taking charge of that room and being the RB1 going into 2024. And I think he's someone that they absolutely need. I think A&M is in a position where they can make a ton of noise if they can put together an offense that is very formidable. I think they're a group of guys that are obviously very talented at pretty much every single position, but none more talented, in my opinion, than Ruben Owens. So I think if he can have a fantastic year, him and Connor Wegman could be one of the most fun backfields in the entire country. But let's move right on here, and let's go to Athens, Georgia, and let's talk about Anthony Evans. This is a guy that's a little bit off the beaten trail. I think he's someone that some fans that aren't UGA fans might not know about. If you're a UGA fan, you know him. There's no question about that. If you did watch the SEC title game, he was the guy that almost took a punt back for a touchdown while wearing somehow 3 mouth guards, which is a totally different thing that is a very weird trend in football right now. But that's a side point. He didn't play much in 2023. He is very young and was still developing his skills. But the second he got on the field, he started to pop. He was returning punts, and it was just, there was something about the way that he got out of cuts and exploded up the field that was just a little bit different than I had seen at that punt returner position in quite some time. So he's someone that I tend to think is going to be kind of a punt returner / kind of gadget guy for UGA in the 2024 season, but he's someone that could absolutely push that wide receiver room and will be a threat downfield because of his speed, and Carson Beck can throw it about a country mile. So I think Anthony Evans is someone that might not be on the field down in, down out, but he will absolutely be on the field at the big time moments and will make some plays that actually win UGA games. So might not necessarily put up the super gaudy numbers, but there will be some big plays in 2024 to be had for Anthony Evans for sure. And then let's go to the tight end position. We're kind of working our way around to all the positions here. Holden Stays is a tight end over at Tennessee. He transferred over from Notre Dame. He was stuck behind Mitchell Evans at Notre Dame, who, in my opinion, is the best tight end in the country coming back this year. So, obviously, it was going to be hard for him to find the field. Now he gets a huge chance at Tennessee. Tennessee has some absolute dudes at wide receiver next to him. Squirrel White, who is just an awesome name. I always love saying it. Brew McCoy, and then Chaz Nimrod. 3 guys that are very, very talented, and also 3 guys that stretch the field quite a bit. So I think the underneath routes and the seams are going to be wide open for Holden Stays to be running down, and I think he's going to have a very, very good season. Nico Iamaleava definitely needs that third down guy, needs that reliable person to go to, kind of like what we talked about with Caleb Williams and Cole Kmet. You need that guy to go to down in when you absolutely need a catch on a 3rd and 8 or something like that as a young quarterback, and I think Holden Stays could absolutely be that for Tennessee this upcoming year. So very excited to see what he can do. I think if he can have a big season, that Tennessee offense could really be unlocked into what it was in 2022 with Hendon Hooker at the helm. I don't know why I lost the name there. But finally, let's get to some offensive linemen, because I have not been showing nearly enough love to the offensive linemen in this series. So let's get 2 in here at the end that deserves some respect. Tyler Booker, a guard at Alabama. To be totally honest, he is someone that has already broken out. He is an absolute beast. He is someone that is going to be at the very top of the list for a number of offensive lineman rankings, especially interior offensive linemen, but he played tons last year at Bama, was an absolute beast in run blocking, is someone that, as we talk about Alabama and we talk about all the guys that are pumped into the NFL, there are tons of linemen that are Alabama guys that have built up a ton of ability, whether it's run blocking or pass blocking, that have done incredible things at the next level, and I think Tyler Booker is the next in that long line. So very excited to see what he can do this year. So not necessarily a breakout candidate in terms of the college football fans, but on the draft boards, he is absolutely someone that will shoot up very, very quickly. I think this Alabama run game will be incredible, and a big reason for that is Tyler Booker, because he is someone that is an absolute difference maker when it comes to pushing a defensive tackle 4 yards off the ball pretty much immediately on every run play. So very excited to see the part that he plays in Alabama's success on the ground. But then finally, we have Cam Williams, a tackle from Texas. This dude is straight up big. He is 6'5", 360. He currently is taking over the right tackle position from Christian Jones, who is very experienced, played a ton of snaps, and got a ton better over the last couple of years at Texas, is now on to the NFL draft. Cam Williams is someone that they have very, very high hope for at Texas. There was some worry early on that he was essentially too big to play tackle because, you have to be laterally quick. You have to be laterally quick. You have to be able to get off your spot very quickly. And that was something that he struggled with early on. But it sounds like he is kind of developing more. Sark said he has developed more physically into a player that can use his size effectively and move the way that he needs to move. I think he is an absolutely huge piece for Texas. As we know, when Quinn Ewers gets time to survey the field and pick his spot, he's very successful. So protection for Quinn Ewers equals success for Texas, and lots of it. So Cam Williams is someone that is super important to what Texas is doing, because we know the left tackle is going to be great in Kelvin Banks. The right tackle is the question mark, and if Cam Williams can break out this year, then Texas might be on their way to another playoff. But we'll take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk the Clemson Tigers, do another Spotlight Wednesday for you. Obviously a huge year for Clemson. We'll break down some of the important things that they need to replace, some of the important ways, important players that need to step up big time, and then we'll break down their schedule and how they can kind of navigate it. So stick with us, and we will be right back with that.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some breakout players on the offensive side of the ball. That was part 4 of that series, so definitely stay tuned for part 4 of the defensive side, and then possibly a part 5 for the offense as well. But let's jump into Spotlight Wednesday, and let's talk about the Clemson Tigers. They are a team that is really under a lot of pressure going into this year, and Dabo Swinney probably the most pressured among the people in Clemson, South Carolina right now. Garrett Riley is not far behind him. So Dabo Swinney, obviously, as we know, is not a big fan of using the transfer portal. He has stuck to those guns. They have not brought in anyone from the transfer portal, but they have lost a number of guys to the transfer portal that are big-time players, and also they have a number of players going on to the NFL. So let's break down all of the people that they will have to replace and then kind of get into how they can replace them. So the biggest one on the offensive side of the ball comfortably is Will Shipley. Losing that guy is an absolutely huge deal for this team. He was essentially all of their offense at certain times in 2023. When Cade Klubnik struggled, he was a huge piece for them, and he's someone that is going to be really hard to replace. They do have Phil Maffa that has played a number of roles right behind him, so I think he's someone that is going to have to step up for Clemson if they're going to be formidable. Bo Collins found his way into the transfer portal and to Notre Dame. He's someone that flashed at times in that wide receiver group, but they're going to need as much help and experience as they can get in that room, so losing him is not necessarily what you wanted. And then finally, they're losing a 4-year starter at center in Will Putnam. Definitely something that some people might not think is a huge deal, but if you watch the Rose Bowl game between Alabama and Michigan, you fully understand how important it is for a center to have the ball exactly where he needs to be pretty much every single time. So I think that is a huge loss. It'll be very interesting to see who steps into that role and how that all that goes going into 2024. But the defensive side of the ball was, to be totally honest with you, torn to absolute pieces. There are a lot of players heading out the door, and it starts with Isaiah Thomas on the edge role. He is someone that is huge for this team over the last couple of years. Tyler Davis and Ruki Ororo is someone, again, on the interior. Both those guys were very important to this team and really set the precedent for a lot of the energy and a lot of the physicality that they played with in 2023. And then Jeremiah Trotter, in my opinion, is the biggest loss of the group at linebacker. He was the emotional leader of this team, and he was someone that everyone turned to when they needed some assistance or they needed to know what to do. He was always doing the right thing, so they definitely need someone to step up into that position. Barrett Carter is the guy that I think is most equipped to do that, but there are definitely some other guys that need to step up as well. And then they had some guys leave in the port. Oh, Nate Wiggins is another one heading on to the NFL at corner. A huge loss for them. A very, very talented guy that was a huge piece for that defense last year. And then they lost some guys to the portal on the back end as well. Toriano Pride Jr. and Andrew Makuba found new places to play in Missouri and Texas, respectively. So both those guys, huge losses on that back end, especially with someone like Nate Wiggins walking out the door. And then just to add to the nightmare that is that back end right now, Sheridan Jones and Jalen Phillips are two guys that were big rotational guys over the past couple of years. They are on to possibly the NFL. I'm not exactly sure what their draft prospects look like, but at the end of the day, they are no longer on the Clemson football team, and they will need to replace tons of guys on the back end of that defense. But there are some things that are absolute non-negotiables when you talk about Clemson being successful in 2024, and I think it starts with Garrett Riley. As we watched throughout last year, Garrett Riley was brought over from TCU after that remarkable run to the national championship, and everyone thought that took Clemson's offense to the next level. Everyone thought that they were going to absolutely light the world on fire. Cade Klubnik was going to have a great year, and they were going to kind of get back to Clemson football. That never really took place. They were a little anemic at times on offense. They were a little confused, it seemed. They just weren't quite on the same page that they wanted to. And Cade Klubnik's success has a lot to do with what Garrett Riley can do in 2024 and how he sets him up for success. But he does have a couple of wide receivers that he can turn to, but he needs a guy to step up. There's no doubt about that. Antonio Williams is someone that has been there for quite some time. Tyler Brown is someone that was stepping into his own throughout last year. TJ Moore, an incoming freshman, is someone that could step into that role, but you need an alpha in that room by no stretch of the imagination. You need a guy that is absolutely the wide receiver one, because the most successful teams around college football always have that guy that they turn to when they need one, whether it's a wide receiver or, in UGA's case, they had Brock Bowers the last couple of years. But you need that alpha in the receiving room that gives you an edge over other people, and any three of those guys could be it, but one needs to. One absolutely needs to step up. And on the defensive side of the ball, things are a little bit tougher because you're losing a ton of guys. Let's start up front with Peter Woods. He is someone that was highly touted freshman coming out of the 2023 class. Had a solid freshman year, did a lot of really, really good things, but now is the official leader of that defensive line. Definitely the most talented player, the player they're probably going to need the most from, and I expect him to give it to him. I think he is someone that is super, super impressive, can do a number of really incredible things. You can honestly put him out on the edge if you really want to in certain situations, so I expect him to fully blow up this season and be a big-time player for Clemson. Kobe McLeod is someone that's huge in the middle of that defense. He's slated to start right now at middle linebacker, so likely could be the guy with the headset. Barrett Carter is another person that I think possibly could get the headset as well. He's a very experienced guy, but you need more than one big-time linebacker in the ACC. You need more than one big-time linebacker if you want to be a national championship contender, and that's exactly what Clemson wants. So guys like Kobe McLeod or Wade Woodaz, both those guys are going to be super, super important for Clemson going into 2024. And then Avion Terrell is someone that needs to be huge on the back end of this defense. Obviously, we talked about Nate Wiggins leaving. He is the brother of AJ Terrell, so Clemson fans have to feel pretty excited about this kid. But a huge shoes to fill with Nate Wiggins falling out of the picture. But I think he's definitely up to the task, and very excited to see him kind of step onto the big stage there. But let's roll through their schedule real quick and see how they can kind of navigate it. First off, the first game is tough to navigate. Let's just put it that way. It is UGA, and I think UGA is going to win this game. To be honest, Clemson can change a lot of minds throughout spring, or in this game have a prime chance to change everyone's mind about the way that they think about them. Even if they don't win, in my opinion, I could be looking at Clemson totally differently after this game, because I just need to see Cade Klubnik feel confident. I don't want him to be timid in that game or nervous going up against Georgia. I want him to come out and be very confident. I want to see some of the players we just talked about on defense make some big plays. So while this is going to be a tough game to win for the Tigers, I won't lie. If they can, play a really, really tough game and do some of the things that are going to be important for them in the long run, I think they could get a lot of people's attention even with a loss. But obviously a win would be incredible. I think there's definitely a chance for that, for sure. But the game after that is App State at home. That's a little bit of a danger spot. App State, as we know, took down A&M a year ago, so could be interesting. Just keep an eye on that one. Then they do have a bye before opening ACC play against NC State at home. So that's definitely an interesting game. Grayson McCall coming in, probably his first game in the ACC. We'll see how he handles all of that. Clemson should likely win, but we'll see what happens there. And then Stanford in Week 5 should be a win. And then they have the big one against Florida State. They are at Florida State this time around, and this is the game that is biggest for them. This is probably the game that is biggest for the ACC and how everything works out there. So very interested to see what happens there. I think it's going to be quite the battle, but we'll have a better idea of what's going to happen once we get to Week 6 and we get to that game. But then they have at Wake Forest and Virginia at home before their second bye. So two games that are very navigable. They should be able to handle them pretty well. And then Louisville comes to Clemson. That is a huge game after the bye. And then they head to Virginia Tech and Pitt. Two games that are a little bit dangerous. Virginia Tech is a very interesting team with Kyron Drones as their quarterback, but I expect Clemson to be able to handle business, at least as of right now, in those games. And then they finish it off with the Citadel and then South Carolina, obviously, at home. So this schedule is relatively navigable. When you're playing UGA the first game of the season, it's going to be tough to have an easy schedule, but at the end of the day, I think they got a pretty good draw. So UGA to start the season at Florida State and Louisville are the big-time games. I don't think there's any question about that. If you can go 2-1 in those games, that is a huge win for that program. If you go 3-0, people are talking about you as a national championship contender, and they absolutely should. So it'll be really interesting to see how this year develops for Clemson. This is obviously a huge year. Dabo Swinney has been under a little bit of fire for the way that he has gone about business in the transfer portal era. But at the end of the day, if he can start winning games again, no one's going to question him. So I think Cade Klubnik, Garrett Riley is going to be huge. That connection and the ability to take this offense to the next level. Peter Woods, I think, is going to be one of the best defensive players in the ACC and in the country next year. So very excited to see what he can do. But a lot riding on this year. There's no doubt about that. I do like Clemson this year. I think they are someone that will likely be in Charlotte at the end of the year. I think they know the importance of this year. Dabo Swinney knows it. I think Cade Klubnik knows it. And I think they know they have to deliver. So I'm very excited to see what they can do. This is a somewhat of a make-or-break year for Dabo Swinney and kind of his legacy in college football in some ways. So it'll be really interesting to see all of that unfold. I think Dabo Swinney is someone that is rather polarizing around college football. So some will be rejoicing as Clemson, falls if they do fall. Some will be celebrating if they, start to rise back up. So it'll be really interesting to see all of that unfold. I think this season will tell us a lot about what the future holds for Dabo Swinney. But that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a ton to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It means a ton to us. It makes a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for all of the updates that you need. Obviously, this is March Madness time, so my guy Nelson over there on the Basketball Podcast will get you fully taken care of there. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow.
Let's go.